Anaïs is a psychologist, Miss Wellness pageant queen, and golf mindset coach. But what really sets her apart is her incredible journey. Before becoming a beacon of mental health and empowerment, Anais faced her own personal challenges, including navigating the pressure of beauty standards and striving for academic success in two very different cultures. Her story is one of resilience and transformation, moving from a place of perfectionism and self-doubt to finding her voice as a professional in both psychology and sports. Today's episode, Anais shares how her experiences shaped her passion for helping others and the mindset tools she uses to thrive. Anais gives us practical tips from her psychology background in cognitive behavioral therapy, also known as CBT, making this episode a powerful and actionable guide for anyone wanting to understand their own mindset and shift their perspective on beauty, success, and self-worth. This episode will explore how Anais turned her challenges into stepping stones and how you can do the same. This is one of those episodes you can listen to on a walk and feel ready to go make some serious life shifts, whether that's setting boundaries, understanding the psychology behind your habits, or simply feeling more confident in your own skin. Before we get into the podcast, please make sure to like the video and hit the subscribe button to the channel. It makes a huge difference to the type of guests we're able to bring on, like Anais. I know many of you have been asking for Beyond the Bod to start posting again, so thank you for inspiring, and I hope you really enjoy the episode and the new direction we're taking. And the first thing I want us to kind of get into is I want you kind of paint me a picture of your early experiences that's led you up to where you are today.
Let's see, where should I start? So I grew up in a Thai French family. So my dad is very traditional French. So I'm not sure if you have the same experience, but he was very strict and, very like disciplined type of style. So he always taught me to work hard and to always try 100% on what you're doing. And funny story, he actually wanted to have a son, but unfortunately for him, he had two daughters instead. So he did teach us and raise us like boys. So making sure that we're, always doing everything like right and not allowed to cry. So having to be like really strong and resilient. So that's my dad. And then my mom is very Thai, so very easygoing, very relaxed. So two people who are extreme opposites. And so I grew up in a family with slightly different values. And so sometimes I would get like conflicting methods of how they raised me. But, overall, I think that my childhood was relatively good. I want to say that I'm pretty happy about my childhood. I had a lot of opportunities to play sports. So I was a golfer for 10 years, and then I played sports in school. As you know, you did the same as well. But yeah, like the environment that I grew up in, it was very volatile, and so that's why I decided to pursue psychology, because I wanted to learn more about myself. I wanted to understand why I was the way that I was, why am I so restless, so angry for no reason. And so that's where I started getting into psychology.
That's interesting that you said that. I feel like a lot of people pursue their initial passion for like what they think they should do, but I think a lot of time when you actually build your career, it starts from like a self reason.
Yeah.
Like you want to figure out something for yourself. Like I do fitness, right? And I was always like stuck on, oh my God, like how do I actually like lose weight? How do I actually find a way to lose weight and keep it off? And now I'm a fitness coach, and it kind of like starts with, like what you want to do.
Yeah.
So was there any other career options you considered before going to psychology?
For me, I really enjoy teaching. So I actually thought I wanted to be a teacher before. I just enjoy like, sharing knowledge. And I also like working with children. So that was my initial plan. But, I got into psychology mainly because I wanted to understand myself better. So I actually went to see a therapist when I was 14. That was the first time. So I had skipped lunch and saved a lot of money, because it was like 3,000 baht for like an hour session, which was a lot for me as a 14-year-old. And then after my first session, I was like, wow, this gave me so much perspective. And it was the first time that something clicked, and I realized like, I need like an outsider perspective. And so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna keep pursuing this because I wanna learn more. And also because I couldn't afford a therapist like multiple times, I decided like, I'm just gonna study this myself and use what I learned to kind of make myself like heal on my own.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you mentioned how strict your dad was. He applied a lot of pressure to be disciplined. Now in hindsight, like right now, are you grateful for that, or do you feel like he could have nurtured a bit differently?
So, if I were to talk about myself, like back in the day, I think I had a lot of resentment before, because I felt like, damn, why is my dad so harsh on me? Like, I'm just a girl. I want to enjoy like the feminine things in life. I want to, be pretty, go shopping with my friends. But I was kind of forced to play sports really early. And, we didn't have like rest days. So it would be every day. On Sundays as well, and we were not allowed to say no. And so for many years I felt like unheard by my father. But then, looking back now, I am grateful because I have the discipline now. So for me, it's like a natural thing to be disciplined and to enjoy working hard. And so I'm grateful for that because I'd rather be like this than, having to learn it all by myself again. Because discipline is like something that takes time to kind of make it natural,
100%, and instilling that early on has probably been really defining, even though when we were younger we probably didn't see it yet.
Yeah.
Even things like keeping an environment clean, keeping your room clean. When our mom used to be like,ทำไมห้องรกจังเลยเก็บห้อง and like stuff like that, you're like, okay mom, I'll do it later. But now that we're in our careers working, we realize how important those things our parents said before was like so important. So yeah, like where did you go to university? So obviously you grew up in Thailand. Let's actually run it back a little bit. Where did you grow up? Where do you go to school? How was school for you?
Okay, so for me, I started off in Bangkok actually, and then around I think 12 I went to Pattaya. So I lived in Pattaya for 5 years. So I switched between international schools, and then towards the end I also came back to Bangkok again. So I went to 3 different international schools, all very similar. But I want to say that the most, I guess, pivotal experience for me was in Pattaya because, it was a very competitive school, lots of kids who were very good at sports, good at school. And, my dad made sure that I was like hardworking academically. He was like, you have to get first place. If not, there are consequences. You have to be good at sports. You got to get the scholarship. If not, there are consequences, right? So I was a very competitive person growing up. And my mind was only on like, being first place. And so, of course, teenagers can be a bit harsh on each other, and so when you're competitive, it creates like, a bit of, competition, a little bit of fights and here and there. So I think international school students, they experience that a lot where there's like lots of competition and lots of like one-upping each other. So I think maybe you share this experience as well.
100%. I think growing up as an international school kid is a unique experience. I don't think we're ever used to stability. We're exposed to so many like in and outs and constant volatile environments. So you said you've been to 3 different schools, and where did you finish like your final years of school?
At Bromsgrove, so it was in Bangkok.
Okay, so you did IB or A levels?
A levels.
A levels. And how was that for you? How were you academically?
I mean, I always had like a relatively good grade, so I was like first place in my high school. I graduated like with straight A stars, and then
She says relatively.
So I did, do quite well in school, but I was also on like a golf scholarship for a few years in Bangkok, and so I was playing sports as well. But I have to say, like towards the end of my high school, I was kind of burning out a little bit. There was a lot of pressure from my parents, and I was like struggling mentally because of what was happening at home. So there were family problems at the same time, and so trying to maintain that, good grades, good athletic performance, dealing with what's happening at home, it was very difficult for me, and having like no outlet or anybody to talk to. Yeah.
Back then, did you realize you were burned out, or is that something that you go back and think like, oh, I was burned out?
I had no idea I was burned out. I was coming back from school and falling asleep every single day, so I'd get home at 4 and I would just nap for 2 hours every single day. And that's when my golf kind of went downhill, so I wasn't training as much anymore, and then my performance was going down, and then I started gaining weight as well. So everything kind of happened towards the same time. The acne started coming in, relationship problems, so it all came, in one go, like just before going to uni.
And you'll work with a lot of clients, a variation of clients. You have athletes, you have normal people. Do you think us as a society, we have a problem of burnout culture?
In today's society, like we really value like the hustle mindset. So you got to keep working, got to get that bag. So I think we forget to take a break sometimes. And things are happening so fast. There's so much information. There's like an overload of like knowledge on the internet and entertainment. And so if we're not careful, I think we tend to be overstimulated and we overconsume. And that's what makes us tired.
So what are some like self-regulation you have now that you wish you had back in school?
So I got into meditation like a few years ago, and I still do it now, like every morning, just even for like 5 minutes. It really helps me like set the tone for the rest of the day. And I make sure to not go on my phone like first thing in the morning, because you don't want to like start expecting dopamine right away. So I make sure to have a very healthy routine in the morning, because it kind of affects the rest of my day. And I'm really into something called EFT tapping. I'm not sure if you heard it before. It's basically a way to regulate your nervous system. So you kind of tap while saying affirmations because you're kind of tapping into like your amygdala, which is like the fear center, the emotion center of your brain. So it helps to calm you down. And cold exposure. So I really like ice baths. That's also really good for kind of managing my cortisol as well.
That's amazing. We should go ice bath one day.
Have you been?
I have.
Where at?
I went to the ice house.
Oh, yeah.
In Sukhumvit, and I've also been to the one in Arya Dip.
Okay, I haven't been to that one yet.
Yeah.
Do you like onsen?
I like it.
Yeah, me
I
too.
really like it. I think it's relaxing, and I think it's interesting how, you know, exposure to different temperatures, because like with meditation it's more of like internal, right, introspective. We're doing this on our own, but whereas when we have exposure to like different temperatures, it's kind of like an external kind of thing. So I always find it interesting how our environment and everything can like impact us.
I think like breathing is also really important. Most people do like shallow breathing, so I teach this to all my students, especially like pre-tournament, like how to breathe properly. So making sure that they're breathing into their diaphragm and not having like shallow or chest breathing, because that causes like a lot of stress on the body, and it kind of like puts you in fight or flight mode. So breathing is also a big part of like what I teach to my clients.
So if someone's getting into inner work for the first time, emotional regulation for the first time, what are top 3 easy access things that you would recommend to them?
Actually, one of the first things I ever did is journaling. I think it's a really good way to kind of create space between you and your thoughts, because you're kind of writing it down and there's like a physical space, so you can see your thoughts a bit more objectively. Because, you know, like when you're kind of, you know, in between thoughts, it's like so close that you cannot see the bigger picture. Kind of like when you're looking at art, if you're this close, you cannot really see like the big picture. And so I really like journaling. I like analyzing thoughts. Where does this thought come from? Is there evidence in my life to show that this thought is true? How can I disprove this thought? You know, just to kind of change your mindset around that thought and make it lose like power over you. Yeah.
That is so amazing, because that's something that I do personally,
Okay,
and I
nice.
do with my clients as well, is creating evidence.
Yeah.
Creating undeniable stack of evidence of like, hey, that thought is actually not true, and I'm creating new evidence to prove that.
Exactly. It's really effective. It's actually a big part of CBT, and also kind of trying to find the root of the thought. Like if you can kind of find like where does this thought originate, it can really help you kind of release that. So sometimes people have intrusive thoughts or like self-sabotaging thoughts, but if they actually think about it, it might not have been theirs originally. It might have been someone else who told them like 5 years ago, and they've taken it as their own. You know what I mean? So writing it down can really help you like detach from that and let it go.
For sure. And I feel like obviously we talked a bit before the episode, and I try to hold myself back from not talking too much because we talked about so much good stuff that we were going to cover here, but we kind of talked about having both us about having ADHD. Right? So did you struggle with getting into inner work at first? Like, do you feel like it was overwhelming to start journaling? Like, how did you deal with intrusive thoughts? How do you start organizing that?
So for me, like when I first got into therapy, they diagnosed me with ADHD in Amsterdam, and they told me, yeah, you're super hyperactive. And I was like, that makes a lot of sense. You know, I was trying to understand like why my thoughts were like this, why I couldn't control any of my thoughts. And so once I understood that, I realized I had to have more compassion for myself, first of all, to not be so harsh if I don't get it perfect the first time. And I started small. You know, it's easier to start small. So just 5 minutes journaling on the first day, and then 10 minutes the second day. Same with meditation. When I got started, it was very hard. I did like 30 seconds, and I was like so done with it. But I kind of stacked it up over time. So for me, like my main advice is to always start like small, because if you do something too drastic, it becomes very hard to like maintain it.
And that's with any habit you build.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just like the mindset stuff you do. It's like, you know, going to the gym for the first time, eating healthy for the first time. You're not going to be perfect from the set go. And it's like building on that habit, reinforcing that positive habit like over time.
Exactly.
Actually, when I went to therapy as well, I struggled with meditation. Now I meditate every day for like 5 minutes in the morning. But when I first started, one of my therapists told me to meditate with like a candlelight because it helps you kind of focus. Obviously, with your psychology background, like, what's the science kind of there that it helps me focus if I look at like a candle flame?
So actually, it's more of like choosing where to place your attention, because if you meditate with like no point to place your attention, you're kind of like, your attention is like really broad. You know what I mean? It's like, maybe it's on this thought, maybe it's like on the sound. So if you choose a place to like put your attention, it becomes easier to kind of follow where it goes, you know? Like once you move away from the candle, then you know, oh, my attention has shifted. So it kind of helps you know like where it's going. Like I try to imagine attention kind of like a dot. So right now it's focusing on our conversation.
Yeah.
Right now, it's like zoomed out and I'm focusing on multiple sounds, you know, so it kind of helps you track where your attention is. Yeah.
So you're specialized in CBT and also ACT.
Yeah.
Obviously, you talk more about CBT because it's more commonly recognized.
Yeah.
So can you differentiate, like, what is CBT, what is ACT, and how is that in practice?
So for me, I really enjoy cognitive behavioral therapy because there's a lot of evidence, like scientifically, to show that it's really effective for depression, and because I've used it myself and it changed, you know, my life like drastically, and so I try to teach what works for me, right? And ACT is very similar, but it's just a more holistic method, so it considers like mindfulness, and they use like slightly different terms. So we use the word diffusion in ACT, which means like detaching from thoughts, but essentially it's very similar, just maybe slightly different approaches. And I think CBT is a bit more practical because when I design like a program for somebody, I will tell them what goals we have, and then we start working towards it like step by step. So it's much more organized for people who like to see results or like practical advice. But both of them focus on reframing thoughts and designing a lifestyle that makes it easier to, you know, pursue your passions, to feel fulfilled, and to live in alignment. Yeah.
So you worked with a lot of high-level athletes, golfers.
Yeah.
Can you tell me one of like your favorite breakthrough moments for those clients? What were their struggles, and how did you guys overcome together, and the ultimate success that you achieved together?
Ooh, there's a lot. Let me think. So I have a lot of clients who come to me for golf mindset, and it turns out that like 90% of the time it's like a personal problem. So, you know, on the surface it seems like I'm helping them with like, you know, golf skills and whatnot, but actually most of what I do is teaching them skills to be able to handle their thoughts and emotions like independently from me. And so it generalizes onto their life, like in other areas too. So you see them becoming happier, like overall, more confident, and then it reflects in their golf performance. So I have an example of one client who came to me because he kept getting angry on the course. He didn't understand why he would lose his control when he would hit a bad shot. And we ended up going like all the way back to his childhood, like, you know, being misunderstood by people or being judged for mistakes. And working through that is what changed his score on the course. So a lot of it is just really like psychology. It's just human psychology. And I think if you're a confident person, if you're able to regulate your emotions, it will just show itself and manifest in all areas of your life, relationships included too.
That's amazing what you do with athletes, and really interesting because a lot of high achievers, sometimes they think like, oh, how they succeed is just what they do now, not realizing that it's like so deeply rooted in childhood,
Yes.
something that they might not be able to remember, and it's so deep down.
Exactly.
What do you feel like is the biggest block from people working on their mindset?
I think the biggest one is commitment, because, you know, people want to see results, right? Humans like to see things happen fast, especially now. Like, we have so much instant gratification from social media. You know, if you want to eat food, you can just order it and it arrives in like 10 minutes. So we're used to having things really fast. And so when it comes to like self-improvement, I think people sometimes lack the patience to wait and see the results. So they give up like halfway when they're getting so close. So I think it's about like showing up for yourself as if your life depends on it. Like, you have to keep showing up even if the result's not there yet, and trust in the process. You know, don't just try and, it sounds corny, but like, don't just focus on the end goal, but try to enjoy the process as much as you can, have fun with it, and then, you know, the next day, all of a sudden, like, everything is going to happen like just how you want it.
How powerful do you think visualization is when it comes to succeeding?
For me, I use visualization a lot in my practice. So I teach all of my young students this because it helps with motivation, first of all, and it helps you with having a clear goal for where you want to be. So you already know exactly what kind of person you want to be, and then you can kind of break it down and ask yourself, like, what steps do I have to take to be this person? Also, because when you visualize, you can kind of connect with that version of yourself in your mind, and you want to like try and embody that person. And when you open your eyes, you want to walk into the rest of the day with that energy, right? So that you have new ideas, you have motivation to, you know, train. You just want to really embody that version that you want to be. You get closer to it every day, and then eventually you'll become that person.
Now, this is actually one of the questions from the IG question poll I put up, because we're talking about motivation. One of the questions was, as a psychologist, what are the steps you would take to stay motivated?
So the first thing I want to acknowledge is that motivation will not always be high. Like motivation goes up and down, so you have to learn to kind of ride the waves as well. I think it's very important to like not lose long-term motivation. So you have to rely a lot on discipline and like the commitment to yourself, right? You have to show up for yourself consistently because no one else is going to. You know, I think a big part of motivation is also developing like deep self-love, because if you really love yourself, you'll have this energy to want to keep showing up for yourself, right? So self-love is a big part of it. The second thing I think where visualization comes in is you want to keep connecting with your reasons why. Why do I do this? What is the reason for doing this? Why do I want to achieve this goal? That's very important, because if you're just going to do it for the sake of doing it, once you get it, it's like, what's next? You know, you need to have like a bigger meaning for yourself, right? So find your why, find your purpose for doing that. And then I think another thing that's really important to keep in mind is to find like an intrinsic reason, because, you know, money is great, you know, having a nice car is great, but extrinsic things, they don't last for a long time. You get happy for a little bit and then you're chasing the next thing. So finding the reason, like, you know, am I doing this for my higher purpose? Do I want to give back to my community? I think connecting with that will help you have long-term motivation.
It's called the rival fallacy, isn't it? Like
Rival fallacy?
When you are focused on like the end goal, that when you get there, it's kind of like underwhelming.
Yeah.
Where true fulfillment is actually from the journey and the process
it is.
The doing every single day.
Yeah, and actually people like, they get more reward from anticipating like what's coming, but when they actually get it, it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it's the same thing with food. I think like sometimes you anticipate food so much and you put it on like this pedestal, and then when you have that first bite, you're like, actually, I kind of hyped this in my head. So that's really, really interesting. Well, we have a lot of questions from the IG poll, so let's start with a few of those. Sure. Do you feel like a Frenchie or more like a Thai?
Well, I don't have a reason that we're going to have the same answer for this.
You go first.
I would say I feel more Thai because I was born here and I was raised here, but I'm also not fully accepted as a Thai because I'm mixed. And when I'm in France, they see me as an Asian. So I don't really belong anywhere. I'm not fully accepted anywhere, but, you know, I can kind of blend in to an extent. Yeah.
That's my experience to a T. If any of you resonate with that, you're like, have something, but 100% not of anything.
Miss Worldwide.
Miss Worldwide. No, I totally understand that. I think a lot of international students will kind of resonate with that as well. Kind of like, you know, it's amazing that we're exposed to so many different cultures, but we're never fully immersed into any. And I think it comes with a lot of like, you know, pros and cons. So what do you think those pros and cons are, like in terms of like growing up in an international environment, growing up in something that there's always different people coming in and out, different cultures? What do you think is the benefit of that, and some cons that people might not realize?
So for me, I think like one of the main pros is language. So we can speak many languages and we can kind of get along with anybody. And I think having like multiple cultures makes you more open-minded. So you're less like, you know, narrowed in terms of like your beliefs. But I will say that growing up with like so many different cultures, sometimes it can create a bit of like an unstable environment. You don't know how to behave. You don't know which standard to like, you know, put yourself to. Beauty standards, you're kind of always changing in between. Like for me, when I was in Europe, I was happy being heavier. First of all, because it's cold, so I have to be a bit heavier. But then when I'm here, when I arrived, I was like, oh, I'm feeling so fit right now. But then everybody was telling me otherwise. Like, oh, you're too big, sis. You gotta lose weight. You gotta be whiter. Like, stay away from the sun. Whereas in Europe, if I'm tanned, it means I have money to go on holiday. So it's always like switching between different standards, which like makes it really hard to know like what's the ideal version of me.
Right, beauty standards. I think we have a lot to talk about that. No, it's so interesting, isn't it? It's like we want what we can't have. Like when we're in Europe, I went to university in the UK. You were in Amsterdam, and like being tan, like you said, was associated with like going on holiday, having money. Whereas being tan in Thailand,
it means you're broke.
It means you're broke. It means you've done labor work, or you know, you work on the farms, and it's so crazy how these different beauty standards are across the world. And do you think that's like slowly changing?
I want to believe that it is changing. Like, you know, in Thailand, I think they're more accepting of like different skin tones. But I will say that it's quite deeply ingrained in like the Thai culture. Like they use like being dark as like an insult, you know, like you're dumb.
Yeah.
It's like insult that you're dark skin, right? So I still think there's a long way to go. But I do believe that it's getting a little better. Yeah, it's improving. But like I said, a long way to go.
Well, you're in the entertainment industry now.
Kind of, getting started.
Yeah, like in the pageant, wellness world. You know, Thai pageants are notorious for Wait, she's in a different type of pageant. So let's start with that.
Okay,
What
sure.
type of pageant are you in at the moment?
Right, so at the moment I'm competing in the Miss Wellness World Thailand 2025 pageant. So it's like a health focused pageant. So they're more focused on educating people, and everybody there is like super intelligent. So everybody's got like a strong CV. We have doctors, we have therapists, we have fitness coaches there. So it's not just about beauty like at all. And the owner of the pageant is Dr. Kieng Sak. He actually was a Harvard professor. At one point, he was Mark Zuckerberg's professor.
Wow.
Yeah, and now he's back in Thailand trying to do something good for Thailand. He wants to teach Thailand about health, because here in Thailand, we're not very knowledgeable about like fitness, nutrition, mental health. It's not a thing at all here. And also we want to help the elderly, because in Thailand, like even though people live to an old age, they don't live like a healthy lifestyle. They tend to be bedridden at old age. And although Thai people are skinny, most of them struggle with diabetes. We just don't see it, right?
Yeah.
So the purpose of this pageant is to promote more health, like healthy behaviors in Thailand, and this doctor is just doing everything he can to like help his country. And funny story, he's been asked so many times to like get into politics, but he's not interested in any of that, because he's doing it just to help people.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think what makes that pageant different from the rest of the pageants is there's a greater impact for society, like a direct impact. And I love that. And I really resonate with what you said with he doesn't want to get into politics, because I have a bachelor's in politics and international relations. I've always wanted to make an impact, but I quickly realized that that wasn't the type of impact that I wanted to make. And I would rather make, like direct impact with my one-to-one clients. And a lot of times when I help my clients, they start to share the stories about the ripple effect they have on their family, friends, and everything like that. So I definitely resonate with that a lot, which is making direct impact that creates that ripple effect.
Also, like when you're young or when you first get into like self-improvement, you think you have to do something so big, but actually if you help one person, it's such a big thing already, because they help the next person. When one person in the family heals, they heal the rest of the family. So I think even something small, it helps on a large scale more than you realize.
And that's why self-care isn't selfish.
Exactly. The more you take care of yourself, the more you have to give to other people.
100%. The perceived beauty standards versus what you truly want. So, you've been in the Western world, in the Thai world. When we talk about beauty standards, what do you truly want? What is your ideal beauty standard?
For me, what I want the most is to feel healthy and to feel confident in my body. And so for me, sometimes that means being a bit lighter, because I want to feel agile. So if I'm in a phase of my life where I enjoy like moving around a lot, I want to feel agile, right? But if I'm in Europe, I want to feel heavier, because I don't know, like it's so cold, I want to feel comfortable in my body. So I'm always like switching into like a body that I feel the most comfortable in. And I think like you kind of get desensitized to comments over time. And so, learning how to detach from opinions, just like detaching from thoughts I mentioned earlier, if you can learn to do that, then other people's opinions won't matter as much. And kind of making your inner voice like really strong. So the more you connect with your intuition, inner voice, the more quiet the other people's voices become. So I think that's really important to find like what you really want. And for me, as long as I feel like happy in my body, I can enjoy life, enjoy food without affecting my health negatively, then I think that's the shape that I want to be in. Yeah.
I think you put it so well, and I wish people realize more that like wanting to have a beauty standard for yourself is not just like external, but it's how you feel internally, and what's gonna make you feel most empowered and help you show up the highest version of yourself every single day.
Exactly. I also want to add that like beauty is always changing. Like the trends are always changing. Like a few years ago, it was like thick and curvy, big lips, and now like skinny is back in trend. So if you're always gonna adapt to trends, like you're never gonna be satisfied, because it's always changing. And plus, like the truth is, we're not always going to look this way. Like obviously we're in our 20s now. It's normal to be beautiful in your 20s, and over time you'll change, your body changes, you age. So I think it's very important to not attach onto any one look, because it's going to change over time. And so I think it's very important for women to also develop other things like hobbies, passions, find your fulfillment, because when looks change, you want to have something else to make you feel confident, right? Yeah.
So do you have any tips for uprooting the really deeply rooted beauty standards?
I mean, I feel like I'm just gonna say the same thing as earlier, like really finding like when you feel the healthiest, like finding the body type or shape where you feel the most confident in yourself, where you feel the strongest. I think feeling strong is important, like being agile to an extent, being able to just move around how you want to. I think it's very important as part of your confidence. Posture is also very important. But I think, as I mentioned earlier, like finding your inner voice as much as possible, make it as loud as possible so that other people's opinions like don't affect the standard that you have for yourself.
We talked about CBT a bit. This question is actually from a doctor.
Okay.
Is metacognition helpful in CBT?
I want to say that it is helpful because metacognition is basically like learning how to be self-aware and observing your thoughts or thinking about your thoughts. So it allows you to create that space. You know, what I mentioned earlier, like the exercise I always do with my clients is to write down your thoughts. So for example, if you have a thought that keeps coming back, I am not good enough, write it down, create that space between you and the thought, and now you're the observer. So analyze the thought objectively. Where does it come from? Is there evidence to prove this to be true? What about the evidence that disproves this? And then you focus on the second list of the disproving list, and then you replace it with an affirmation. So I think by creating that space, metacognition, thinking about your thoughts, it allows you to be the one in control of it.
And where do you think most people go wrong with affirmations?
Ooh, I think sometimes people go like with the most basic affirmation where they have no connection to it. They're just saying something they saw on the internet, or they repeat it so many times that it doesn't create any feeling anymore. So I think affirmations have to be personal. It has to like, you know, make you feel something, and it has to be very personalized to you.
100%. I think it's the same with like, you know, like vision boards. It's like when people pick things that they don't have an emotional pull towards it, it becomes just something that they won't be motivated to do.
Exactly. You have to have some kind of emotional connection to it. And the thing with humans is we get like desensitized and habituated so fast. So sometimes it's a good idea to like switch up your affirmations or have like a rotation so you don't get like so used to it that it's just like empty words.
100%. If you had one advice for people who were dealing with getting comments about body, working on new goals from other people, what would you tell them?
I would say that, first of all, like, why does it matter what other people have to say unless they're paying your bills? The second thing I want to say is, like, there's power in saying no. When you're able to say no, you can feel, like, really confident because you're standing up for yourself. And so, you know, you can say no mentally. You don't have to tell them, like, no, like, shut up. You can also do it, like, mentally. So you can set a mental boundary. So sometimes when someone makes a comment about me, which I don't agree with, mentally, I reject that. I'm like, nope, you're wrong. You know, so sometimes it's just like setting that intention to say no mentally, or actually telling them no, like, you know, I don't want to hear about that. I'd rather you not comment on it. I think it's really impressive to stand up for yourself. And I think, you know, I understand that in Thai culture, it's kind of rude to say no, and we're kind of taught to be people pleasers. But the more you people please, the more you're letting yourself down. And eventually you're going to resent the other person, but also resent yourself. So learn to say no mentally, but also like actually. Yeah.
What's your biggest tip navigating social media versus real life and setting boundaries?
Okay, so for me, like when it comes to social media, as you mentioned already, it's really important to set boundaries. So only follow the people and the things that you want to see. I think it's really important to put like a limit in terms of like how much time you spend on there as well if you want to take care of like your dopamine and your mental health. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that social media is like a highlight of someone's life. It's a very small portion of someone's life, you know? So if you can, try not to judge them like just based on what they post. You know, I feel this a lot. Maybe you have this too. Like when you post about your business online, like when people see you, they assume this is like your whole personality. And so it can be a very limiting space if people kind of just take it for what it is. But I think that if you go into it with the perspective of, okay, this is just a highlight of someone's life, it can make you connect more with people, and it can be like a place to like meet like-minded people. So boundaries, you know, perspective, and also limiting like the actual time on there just for your mental health.
Yeah, I have something in my Google Calendar I call conscious consumption. So like, you know, sometimes people like, oh, I need to stop scrolling. I just need to delete this. I'm like, that is actually not going to solve it, because in the society we live in with a lot of careers, it's kind of impossible to live without social media at all.
Yeah, it's become very hard, yeah.
So I think it's important to take responsibility of your consumption, and I actually have it in my calendar to be like conscious consumption. I give myself 20 minutes to just scroll.
Yeah, exactly. Like setting a timer is really good, especially with people who have ADHD. Like I was taught in therapy to always have a timer. It's called the Pomodoro technique.
I use it every day. Yeah.
Having a timer is so good because sometimes you kind of get lost and you're like so into what you're doing, but that timer, it pulls you out of it.
Yeah, it's super powerful. How was it telling your family, maybe specifically your dad, because he put a lot of pressure into like you academically? How was it telling your family you're going to pursue psychology full time?
My parents actually wanted me to be a lawyer, and so I actually applied for law school in Europe, and I was accepted, and then I secretly applied for psychology without telling them.
Love that.
And then when I got there, because I got accepted to both faculties, last minute I was like, yo, Dad, I gotta go for psychology. It's just what my heart is telling me to do. And I did do it, and because I was there without them, like they couldn't stop me, right? So I ended up going with my intuition, which in the end was the right choice because I'm super fulfilled with what I'm doing now, and it's what I love and what I believe I'm good at. But yeah, in the beginning, I will say that they were not very trusting of my decision because they were like, how are you going to get a job if you're going to come back to Thailand? There's no work in psychology. Is it even a real career? Is this even like a real thing? You know, they didn't understand what, like how it benefits people. And also when I first came back, I was like, I'm going to start everything from scratch, like start my coaching business. They were also like, are you sure? Don't you want to do like a stable job? But you know, I stuck with it. I trusted my intuition and myself. I trusted my decision making, and eventually it paid off. And now they're super proud. They don't say it, but I know they're proud.
That's amazing, Anais. And I think it's fair to say that like you're an industry disruptor. And I think, you know, we're both in spaces where a lot of people at the start like, are you sure about that?
Yeah.
Like, are you sure you're gonna make money? Are you sure anyone's gonna be interested? But that's how us as a society actually evolve over time. If no one's going to do it first, then who's going to be first?
Exactly. And actually, like, I didn't plan to get into like sports psychology and golf at all. Like, I just went with what I was good at. I followed like where my strengths were. I was like, you know what, I'm connected in the golf industry because I played golf for 10 years. I can offer something that nobody else can, right? So it's very niche. So golf mindset, there's like almost nobody who does it here in Thailand.
Yeah.
So I found like a very niche market, and it works really well for me.
I love that. And I think that's kind of a theme in Asia where like people treat high level sports and competition, detach it from like mindset and psychology as if like it's not super intertwined.
I know, like they don't really understand like the connection just yet. So I feel like my responsibility is educating people about that and showing them the results, that it does work, that it does make your child happier and perform better as well.
Mindset coaching, psychology is very niche in Thailand, especially with athletes. So when you're helping these athletes, do you receive any pushback or skepticism from parents?
Yeah, I do get that a lot, like especially in the beginning. So I have to kind of explain to them like how I can benefit their kids because first of all, the sessions are private, so the parents are not sitting there with the kids, so they don't know what I'm doing, they don't know what I'm teaching, so there's a lack of trust compared to like a swing coach where they can actually watch the coach like show the kids what to do, right? So I have to do a lot of explaining, and you know, sometimes like parents are a little bit nosy, like they want to know what the kids are doing, which I totally understand. You know, you wanna get the best coach for your child, you want to know what they're learning, right? But I have to respect the child's privacy. Sometimes they tell me things about the parents, which obviously I cannot go tell them because I don't want to add to the problems. So a lot of what I do is like translating and mediating parents and kids. So making sure I'm looking after the kid, but also like making sure the parents are comfortable with what I'm doing and feeling reassured that they're in safe hands.
That's amazing. I feel really kind of pulled to that because obviously growing up with multicultural household with a Thai mom and everything, mental health was almost taboo.
Yeah,
you know?
very, very.
It's almost like something that if you struggled with, you were almost like a drama queen or do lakon yak gun and stuff like that. So do you feel like Thai culture view mental health as taboo?
I feel like a lot of Thai culture doesn't yet believe that mental health is a thing. Like they actually think that when you see a psychologist, there's something severely wrong with you. Like they say, because you know the Thai word for like a psychologist is jitvidiya, and so when you go see a jitvidiya, youเป็นโรคจิต. You know what I mean? So there's something severely wrong, which is not true. You can be completely healthy and still see a therapist because you want to take yourself to the next level. It doesn't reflect at all like your mental state, and so a lot of what I have to do is explain to parents that just because you come to me doesn't mean that there's something very wrong with your child. I'm just trying to help them get to the next level, you know, and that there's no shame in coming to see me. A lot of times, like when I get really good results, I'm excited to share it with other people. I want to show people like the results and the progress. And then I ask the parents, like, would it be okay if I shared her story because it's so impressive? And they always get a little bit awkward. They're like, oh, we don't really want our friends and family to know that she's been seeing you because we don't want them to misunderstand. And because they see it as like a reflection of their parenting, like if my child has mental, you know, problems or my child needs help mentally, that means the parents are lacking in some way. So they don't want that to reflect badly on them.
I think a big element of our culture is saving face.
Oh yeah, that's a big issue here, saving face, and also like very indirect, like they're not able to tell things directly. Like one example, like I had a parent who I asked, would it be okay if I share your child's like success story? And they were like, oh, giving me a list of reasons. And I was like, you know, if you're not comfortable, just let me know.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting how things that on the surface level they think they're just like protecting themselves is actually holding themselves back.
Yeah, it really is. And it can be very limiting. Like in that space, like a lot of these kids can really benefit from just having someone that they can talk to. And, you know, like sometimes kids have a hard time talking to parents. But like for me, I'm like a peace out. You know, like I'm a therapist and coach, but at the same time, I try to be as like down to earth as possible. I try to be like an older sister.
Okay, so the question I have for you is, which year was the most important year for your personal growth and why?
I would say like in the first year of COVID, so I think that's 2019, mainly because I was in isolation. I was in Europe alone, no family, no friends. Everybody went back to their relatives, and I was like stuck abroad. And I live alone in a studio, and that was when I had the chance to be the most introspective, you know, because there's less distraction, so you have more time to kind of go inwards. And that's also when I got into spirituality. So because of all the extra time, I was like really into meditation. It started off with like 10 minutes, then 1 hour, and then it became like 4 hours. And then it started like, you know, becoming like a really spiritual thing, which made me find out about manifestation, law of attraction, all these things, which I applied to my daily life now. And so I would say that year was when my mindset shifted the most.
Wow, that's so amazing, because 2019 was the year that was pivotal for me the most as well.
Okay, wow. You want to tell me about it?
Yeah, it was during COVID. Like you said, like you were put in a situation where you have more time alone at home. And I think COVID was, you know, a hard year for a lot of people, a lot of businesses. But I feel like for me, it was like a make or break moment. And it was like almost like a blessing in disguise. Like you said, it allowed me to have a lot of introspection, a lot of time for myself, and figure out what I want to do in life. Because my degree was politics, and I definitely didn't want to do politics with my life. And that's when I started my business as well. So it's really interesting, because I didn't know that you know, you were stuck at university during COVID, and that was a pivotal year for you. So that's really cool to hear that.
You know, a lot of times like when things go wrong, sometimes it's like a blessing in disguise, like you mentioned, because it really depends on how you like handle the situation. Like I felt super lonely and kind of confused as to what was going on, but then if I have nothing to do, might as well just spend some time with myself and really get to know myself.
Yeah, 100%. And I think even though that was during a pandemic time, I think that can still be applied to anyone going through a hard time at the moment, and not viewing a roadblock or a problem as something that keeps them stuck, but actually an opportunity to pivot and reroute.
Exactly. Like, you know, life goes in like motions. Like you cannot always be like on a high all the time. You cannot always be on a low as well. There's always going to be shifts. And so if you learn to ride the waves, you can really get, you know, the most out of life. And I think it really depends on like your perspective and mindset going into it. Like in the moment, it's always very hard to see the bigger picture, but every time you get over it, you look back, you're so proud of yourself.
Yeah, 100%. And now that like you're living in Thailand, like what's next for you? How do you like, what's the vision you see for yourself for the next year?
The next year, well, I plan to first of all finish the pageant. So my plan with that is to get like a larger platform so I can teach more Thai people about mental health and mindsets, and continue growing my business. You know, I want to upscale it eventually and do more workshops, and to be able to do like, you know, speeches about mental health, mindset, psychology, how to find your purpose and passion, how to live a happy life and get fulfillment from life, and just try to like spread that knowledge as much as possible, and eventually like collaborate with other psychologists too, to like do events and stuff. So that's like my long-term vision for the next 5 years, 10 years. You know, now I'm still young, so a lot of it is gaining experience and getting myself known. Part of why I'm doing all this pageant stuff and getting into entertainment is mainly because I want people to see my face and know who I am. I have no interest in like clout and fame. I just want people to know what I do for a living, because it's going to help me reach the right people eventually.
That's the power of putting yourself out there.
Yeah, exactly. And getting over the fear of being seen. Like for me, that's been my journey the past year, like putting myself more on social media, putting myself out there, even in like spaces where I'm not comfortable, just so that people can see me for what I have to offer the world.
100%. I feel like a lot of times people get held back from, oh, what are people gonna think? Like, what if I start this business? What if I start working on myself? People are gonna judge me. Like, so what? Exactly.
I always say this, unless they pay your bills, like it literally doesn't matter.
At the end of the day, as bleak as this sound, you're the only one going to your grave.
That's true. Like, at the end of the day, you're the main character of your life, and so you have to treat your life like that. You know, if you're going to listen to everybody, then you're no longer the main character.
100%. And I feel like it's so amazing to connect with you today, because me and Anais actually go way back. I think the last time we saw each other was 10 years ago on Walking Street.
Yes.
Let's not get into that. So it's really amazing to see how, you know, we've become our own person, go after our passions. And I feel now that we've connected today, we're able to connect on a lot of things and maybe like do some more stuff together one day.
For sure. I definitely see us like having like very overlapping visions, and we're going in a similar direction for sure.
So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you
So
as
if you
well.
can let our viewers know how they can find you and connect with you.
Yeah, so my Instagram is Anaïs Verny, so ANAISVRNY. I have a website as well if you're interested in working with me. So I do mindset coaching, tailored programs. So I help you reach your goals. I break it down for you, and I also help tailor your routine so that it fits perfectly with your goals. And especially if you're a golfer, then there's only one mindset coach. There's only one mindset coach for golf in Thailand right now, and she's here.
And thank you so much for being here today. It was so awesome having you in the home studio, and maybe we'll do another episode one day. So thank you guys for tuning in to Beyond the Bod podcast. I'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.